Steven Stamkos to the Boston Bruins? Let's make it happen here on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, June 12th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. On today's episode, we are mapping out a path for Steven Stamkos to become a member of the Boston Bruins. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my dad jokes, hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren. Now, it's no secret the Bruins need some secondary scoring, and they also need someone who can play center. Someone who fits that bill is Steven Stamkos of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who can become an unrestricted free agent on July 1st. Now, it seems inconceivable that they would let him walk on the open market, although it almost did happen a few years ago. I was working for The Score at the time, a full-time hockey news editor covering all the breaking news, sending out the notifications on the app. And that, of course, was the day that Steven Stamkos decided to return to the Tampa Bay Lightning. PK Subban was traded to the Nashville Predators for Shea Weber, and Adam Larson was sent to Edmonton in exchange for Taylor Hall. All that happened within like a 30-minute time period. But up until that point, there was a very real possibility that Stamkos was going to hit the open market and become an unrestricted free agent. And that possibility exists once again because the Lightning, as it stands, are already at $82.665 million projected cap hit with only $5.335 in projected cap space. They appeared to be in a decent position before they went out and acquired Ryan McDonagh from the Nashville Predators, a guy who had been a core member of their blue line for a few years. They let him walk. He signed with Nashville, and then they brought him back with no salary retained. They currently have 4 defensemen making at least $5 million, with McDonagh at $6.75 over the next 2 seasons. So in order for the Lightning to make an extension offer to Steven Stamkos, or in order to get cap compliant at the very least before opening night, they're going to have to shed some cap space elsewhere. And they also have some other unrestricted free agents to make decisions on, notably Anthony Duclair, who was acquired prior to the trade deadline. That's a guy the Bruins should be in on. I've said that for years as well. Tyler Mott, Austin Watson, Calvin DeHaan, Matt Dumba, Hayden Fleury on the blue line are unrestricted free agents. So not only do they only have 10 forwards signed at the moment. They have 6 defensemen, 2 goalies, $5.35 million to sign Steven Stamkos, who, don't forget, last season was pretty good. 79 games played, 40 goals, 41 assists for 84 total points, 1.03 points per game. He did have a career worst minus 21. That's also a function. First of all, who cares about plus minus that much? But it's also a function of the fact that the Tampa Bay Lightning aren't what they once were. And that leads into a question as to why they would reacquire Mr. McDonagh when perhaps they need to be getting a bit younger here. So Steven Stamkos could be made available as a function of the Lightning not having enough cap space. Now, the Lightning are always super creative when it comes to the cap, maneuvering the cap. Perhaps Tanner Janot could be moved, although he has a no trade list of 16 teams, and they just gave up like 5-6 picks for him. Nick Paul, Anthony Cirelli, Brandon Hagel. You're not moving Kucherov or Point probably, or Victor Hedman. It's just baffling that they would go out and bring back McDonough when they have Stamkos to re-sign, unless they're letting him explore his opportunities on the open market. And the Hockey News writing, this is Michael DeRosa of the Hockey News, putting the Bruins as a nightmare landing spot for Steven Stamkos. They write, if Stamkos hits the market, it would not be surprising if the Boston Bruins were among the clubs interested. Their primary goal heading into the offseason is to add a first-line center, so a star like Stamkos is surely somebody they would love to have. They also have over $20 million in cap space entering the offseason, so they could give Stamkos the kind of deal he was looking for. It would be awful for the Lightning if Stamkos landed on the Bruins, DeRosa writes. The Bruins have been one of the top clubs in the Atlantic Division for several years, and they would only be getting better by adding number 91. The Lightning and Bruins have also had some heated battles over the years, end quote. Now, how could the Bruins make this happen? Where would he play? That's something we'll discuss here as the podcast continues. But all that to say, off the top, that Steven Stamkos could be available if the Tampa Bay Lightning are not able to shed some cap space. Teams have this bad habit of bailing other clubs out when they're in cap trouble. It's possible they could be able to shed some cap space, or, someone's injured to begin the season. Put them on LTIR. We'll figure it out later. This team is very creative cap-wise. But at the same time, free agency is in a few weeks, and perhaps Steven Stamkos, who does not have a contract extension, will explore his options on the open market. And we'll discuss where he might fit in with the Boston Bruins here as the podcast continues. If you're looking for NBA Finals tickets or to check out the next Red Sox game, Game Time makes getting tickets fast and easy. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets, MLB tickets, as well as tickets to comedy, sports, theater near you. I love the view from your seat option. You get a panoramic shot. You know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. And you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, comedy, concerts, theater, etc. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And every day, you should also check out Locked On Sports Today. All the latest news, opinions, analysis from across the Locked On Sports universe, free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Now, earlier in the season, questions did jump up about Steven Stamkos' future with the Tampa Bay Lightning because he had come out and said that he was disappointed with the lack of contract extension talks. This was back in September. He was eligible to sign a contract as of last July, and he said it was something that he expressed at the end of last season that he wanted to get something done before training camp started. That was as he was entering the final season of his 8-year deal that averaged out at $8.5 million. Lightning GM Julien Brisebois did say that it was in everyone's best interest to have him finish his career in Tampa, but he did indicate that contract talks were going to wait until the end of the season. And that was a big bombshell at the time. Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet called it a big shot across the bow. And he added that some players close to Stamkos felt that Tampa wouldn't be crushed if he ended up leaving. Shayna Goldman of The Athletic at the time projected a 3-year deal at an AAV of $7.6 million for Stamkos. And again, going back to the Ryan McDonagh deal and where the Lightning stand now, they only have $5.35 in available cap space. So, where could he fit in with the Boston Bruins? Well, they do have an abundance of cap space to work with. Over $20 million, in fact. 4 times more than the Lightning have to work with at the moment. Yes, a big chunk of that is due to Jeremy Swayman. Perhaps Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen will be re-signed. But Steven Stamkos would be a fantastic addition for this team. And if they're sticking to Shayna Goldman's projection of 7.6, I'd much rather sign Steven Stamkos to 3 years at $7.5 million than Elias Lindholm at like 7 times 8 or 8. Yeah, 7 times 8 million or even 7 times 7 million. Stamkos is, of course, older, 34 years old, but I'd rather take his 81 points at 34 years of age, carry that over for the next 3 seasons. He still has some gas left in the tank. He's still a very good player. Give me that for 3 years, playing with Brad Marchand, playing with David Pastrnak, over a long-term deal for a guy like Elias Lindholm, who's probably the second best center available. Now, should be noted that Stamkos didn't exclusively play center last season. He did line up on the wing quite a bit, although he still was pretty proficient in the faceoff circle, winning 56% of his faceoffs, 357 total, which was down from the last couple years. But while he was playing wing in Tampa, he can still certainly play center for the Boston Bruins, line up down the middle, or maybe, change off with Zacha and Pastrnak on the wing. A line of Zacha, Stamkos, Pastrnak could be extremely effective. Keep Jake DeBrusk, have him playing with Coyle and Marchand. That's a pretty sick top 6 for the Boston Bruins, and you're not committing as much term-wise and maybe even money-wise as you would to a guy that you could bring in Lindholm, but his game kind of resembles more that of Coyle and Zacha than kind of a game breaker in Stamkos. This is a guy, don't forget, who has had several 40-goal seasons. He's got a 60-goal season, 50-goal seasons. This guy can put up numbers, and it's not as though he's slowing down. Over the past 3 seasons, he's averaging like 92 points, which is pretty good. In fact, that would be, the second best point total on the Boston Bruins if you look at last season's roster. So Stamkos could be available because the Lightning don't have a ton of cap space. The Bruins do have a ton of cap space. And for me, it would make more sense to sign him to, say, 3, maybe 4 years at, let's say, 7 million than it would investing 7 years at 7 to 8 million in Lindholm. Let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments or on social media. What should the Bruins do in terms of pursuing Steven Stamkos? But for me, it makes all the sense in the world. Fluto Shinzawa was asked in a recent mailbag on The Athletic, what do you think about the Bruins bridging their center vacancy with Steven Stamkos on a 3-year deal? Haven't heard his name mentioned as much. With Tampa's cap issues, he could help solve the offense. Fluto wrote, the Bruins would love to have him. Depends on the price. Green light if you consider $7 million annually. We'll talk about why that might make more sense and what other centers they could be prioritizing, namely Elias Lindholm this summer and or Leon Draisaitl next summer, here as the podcast continues. We live in an unpredictable world, but a good life insurance plan can give your family the financial safety net it needs to protect against some of those unknowns. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Get the peace of mind you need by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. All right, in that mailbag I mentioned with Fluto Shinzawa, he was asked, what free agents do you see the Bruins prioritizing this summer? And he said he sees them making a big push for Lindholm, who fills multiple needs at center. His market probably dipped because of the way he played for Vancouver after being traded, but teams use such fluctuations as another data point in an overall projection, and the arc of Lindholm's career remains positive. His style of play should be an excellent fit. That might be it in terms of high-impact signings, though, Shinzawa writes. Quote, as much as they could use another scoring wing, they may not have the dough to go after Jake Gensel or Sam Reinhart. They also need to reinforce the left side of the defense and fill out the roster with depth players. So Lindholm appears to be the target for the Boston Bruins. Although, again, I would argue that Steven Stamkos could be the better play here. Looking at their last 3 years, Stamkos has 271 points compared to 190 for Lindholm, 116 goals versus 79 for Lindholm, 1.12 points per game versus 0.08. Lindholm does have 1,000 more faceoff wins, 1% better in terms of faceoff success rate, 54.9 versus 53.2. He plays 2 minutes more on average, shorthanded, plays on the power play, blocks shots. So perhaps Lindholm is the better player defensively. But again, you have those kind of guys in Coyle and Zacha. Is Lindholm really an improvement over those two guys offensively? Probably not. And you can rely on those guys, the kicker being in the faceoff circle, where they were not great in the playoffs, especially. So it depends what you're looking for. Do you want that offense from a guy who can play center? Or do you want to add that offense on the wings and bring in another, perhaps more defensively minded two-way center in Lindholm? For me, I'd go with Stamkos for 3 years at $7 million over Lindholm at 7 years for $7 million. Now, Fluto has also asked the Bruins, of course, need a top-tier center. This year's class is thin, with Stamkos and Lindholm highlighting it. Is it wise for the Bruins to sign and maybe overpay, or are they better to hold off and target next July, with Leon Draisaitl perhaps being an option? Fluto wrote, "It's a risky thing. Draisaitl would check so many boxes. Centers of his age and quality do not become available. You never know with Edmonton just because of the lifestyle issue with so many players. But unless the Bruins have good intel that Draisaitl will walk, it would be a very big bet to save money and risk him not going to market. You would think the Oilers would move him at a premium if he doesn't want to resign. If that's the case, it's hard to see the Bruins having enough assets to do the deal. I think they'll deal with the known come this July 1 and fill their immediate needs." Also, next year, I should add John Tavares could become an unrestricted free agent. He was a guy that the Bruins did pursue before he signed with the Maple Leafs. We'll see how things go. Fluto was also asked, would the Bruins be better off making Charlie Coyle their number 3 and creating the best third line in hockey with Trent Frederick and Morgan Geekie, then use Matt Poitras at 2C with Brad Marchand, and a free agent right wing, perhaps a guy like Patrick Kane? Absolutely, Fluto writes. Coyle would be the number 3 in name only. He'd still play in all situations and beyond for endgame play. But there's no way to tell whether Poitras will be ready on the second line next year. He might even play in Providence at some point, depending on how he recovers from his surgery. His next step in his development will play a big part in how things unfold. So that's an option as well, with Poitras stepping in, and maybe they prioritize the wing. All this to say, the Bruins are going to have a ton of flexibility heading into free agency, and we can't say it enough. Don Sweeney needs to spend wisely and set this team up. He has a great opportunity here to add to the roster and set them up down the middle for the next few years. Do you want to commit long-term to Lindholm, or do you go with the shorter-term play in Stamkos to give yourself even more flexibility down the line when the cap could be $100 million? Or do you tie yourself down to a guy and hope for the best? I saw this morning, Daily Faceoff, saying Pierre-Luc Dubois might be a buyout contender on the Kings. If that's the case, do you sign him for cheap and see what happens? Maybe that's a topic for another day. But for today, my contention is, if Steven Stamkos is available, you sign him 3 years, $7 million, maybe 4 years, and add that instant offense to the lineup, leadership, veteran experience. Perhaps Pat Maroon comes back and joins a guy he won a cup with, and Stamkos and Marchand build some chemistry. Perhaps both can play for Team Canada at the Four Nations Cup and the Olympics in 2026. Will it happen? My gut says no, but if it's a possibility, you have to explore it. All right, that's today's episode, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on a fresh episode on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day.